Hello everyone, this is Iron Mark 3, and today I've got a little showcase video for you on space engineers. Something that's going on at the moment is Last Stand Gamers is having a dogfighting tournament, and I decided to try to be one of the participants, which led to me designing this particular ship here, which I called the Trident. Quite powerful, quite fast, and in my usual fashion quite over-designed. So I just wanted to make this video to show it off and also show how I arrived at this design as my final entry for the tournament. Though I admit the odds are quite high that I won't actually get in, because no doubt there is a lot of people who are actually trying to enter it. Now this is my little work site here, with all the various prototypes and the work I did trying to work out exactly which ship I wanted to do. There was originally an asteroid here, I'll admit, but I deleted it for this session because, well, I didn't want it in the way, and I just wanted to try and increase the frame rates while I just give you a quick rundown of these various bits and pieces. To start out with, I wanted to actually have a look at the mods themselves, because I'm not familiar with the engines or the scatter cannons. So I built this little test ship. It's just a cockpit with a few parts whacked onto the sides of it, really. 3 cannons, of course, and its makeshift nature is quite obvious because of how lopsided it is with the engines on the back. Which is unfortunate, but there you go. From there, I normally build ships in one go, trying to build a single finalised design, but for this particular set I tried to do something different, which was build the internal structure first and then wrap a hull around it. This was my first attempt, trying to focus on a single engine at the back from Sage's industrial engines, and the rest of it just normal engines, a nice solid core of gyros in the middle, and a triad of scatter cannons at the front, which I then armoured up into this really small, really nimble little fighter. It's not bad for a first attempt. It let me get a bit of a feel for the engines, which are mounted at the back, but I really do prefer larger, heavier ships, so something like this was not really something I wanted to try and use in an actual fight. The armour is not good enough, the cockpit's exposed, weapons all clustered together. I mean, if you hit this thing in the front with a rocket, if you didn't kill the cockpit, you'd probably kill the weapon systems. So that wouldn't be a good idea. Though, to be honest, these scatter cannons, I kind of fell for them from the first moment I used them. Even back on the first test ship, so they are what I designed my entire ship around, pretty much. All of these prototypes are built around scatter cannons. Moving onwards, I tried to build a heavier design, more in keeping with what I wanted. I gave it more industrial engines just for side thrust, because in a dogfight I'll be strafing a lot. I don't tend to use the vertical thrusters, so they're just normal engines. And because of the high weight, it's got more power, and it's got twin engines at the back, just to try and get it moving. And at the front I tried to address the weakness of the previous design by spreading out the cannons, just to make them hardier and harder to knock out. Up-arming it resulted in this. Unique features of this is I tried to flare it forward with the armour around the cannons themselves to give them a little bit more protection. The central one is exposed to the sides, but it's got the extra armour at the fronts, and the cockpit is also more enclosed, hopefully to give it more protection while still actually giving it plenty of view. Just look out, look around, all over the place. So it's quite easy to use in first person as well. This is more of a crab style design, to be honest, because it's got a wide flat hull at the back and these 2 longer weapon arms, though the effect is spoiled slightly by having that central arm as well. Moving onwards with this, I wanted to find out what a hit and run skirmish design might be like. So I created this thing around 4 engines pointing to the rear, and the rest of it is purely small thrusters, just to try and keep the entire thing in check. It also has a lot of internal cargo space in the form of these small containers, just trying to give it something to hang on to. And up-armouring it's turned into this, which actually turned out to be a very nice hit-and-run fighter. The armour is a blend of the styles used on the previous two. More of an angled design, but leaving some systems exposed. Like the engines are partly exposed in the sides there. The tubes feeding the weapons are also partly exposed. Things like that. And I also added these two extra thrusters on the back, just for show really, because they don't really need it with the 4 engines. Though admittedly it does also make it a little bit harder to disable. In testing, this thing proved to be very good at charging in and then getting the hell out of there when it got into trouble. Now at this point I actually had a chat with Nathan, and it's my first real attempt at trying to do a variance on a design. Because up until now I've always tried to build a ship in one go. I've always done it one go, I've never really tried it, and once I hit a perfect shape I was done with it. I didn't want to tamper with it anymore. So I didn't really try to build variants of any design. So my next ship is actually this basic fighter, the very first one, and I took it and increased its engine power in the form of a pair of industrial engines on the sides to give it additional strafing. And I also increased the number of thrusters upwards and downwards to give it a bit more overall manoeuvring. I also I was tempted to try and increase the power, but it turned out I didn't need to, so that's why the rest of it maintains its overall shape. And I also fiddled with the weapon systems a little bit, spreading them out a bit more to make them a little bit harder to disable. It maintains the same amount of reverse thrust as it had before, but it's got this very nice angled appearance to it now. Even if it's a wider craft, maybe a little bit easier to hit. But it still moves like a bat out of hell, really. So it can really strafe hard with those side thrusters. Then, using that as a basic idea, I did the same thing to my medium weight fighter over there, by also adding to this one industrial thrusters on the sides, and some more angled armour plating. I also increased it with some additional large engines, and I tucked in some additional small engines on the back and a third thruster as well to give it forward thrust. This craft is now more heavily armoured, it's faster, and it actually also didn't need any additional reactors to try and fuel the engines, because it turned out to have enough spare power to keep everything running. From here though, I finally hit on the last design in what would become the Trident. This is the internal layout. As you can see, it's spread out quite a bit more. It's much larger than these ships, and in fact just this internal systems is about half again as heavy as this entire ship. The idea of this one is excessive acceleration in all directions in the form of multiple industrial thrusters, and it also had them for forward and reverse as well, so the entire thing is based around the industrial thruster, with small thrusters to provide additional power and also to make it harder to completely disable it if you happen to destroy any of its main engines. Though with this many industrial thrusters, it had an impressive amount of reactors to actually keep all of the power flowing. I mean, just in this version alone there is a total of, 6 large reactors needed to keep the power on, which is a bit much. I also decided to go with this off-centered hull design, just to try and move away from the flat, symmetrical designs of the previous ones, and experiment a bit and see what I could come up with. This is actually where I did combat testing, because this thing was half armoured. It wasn't anywhere near done, the main central bit was still fully exposed. And this is where I went in with Nathan to do a bit of dogfighting. We tried nearly every combination of these available ships up to this point, and they all proved quite effective actually. They could all do the job, they could all manoeuvre, they could all turn. They all hit quite hard. The scatter cannons may not do much damage, but their focused fire was still enough to cause quite a lot of harm to each other. And that's really where things got tested. And that's also where I kind of finalised on the Trident as the basis of my final design. over here is something else that I built since then. It's not actually a complete ship, but this was intended to be the main engine module of another larger, kind of futuristic style ship, based around this big power ring, which would have the cockpit and weapon systems out the front, more power systems and docking around the back. And this would have been a slightly larger fighter than the actual Trident would have been. And it would have actually been more manoeuvrable. It's got more power in all directions, including reverse, well, especially reverse. But in the end I didn't go with it, because I'm quite happy with the Trident, and frankly, because of I did this actually earlier today, I'd run out of time. So yeah, let's move on. This is the fully finished version of the Trident, using that internal system there. And it really does handle quite well in terms of combat potential. It's the only one that doesn't have any landing pads, so it's got to land using these clamps here. And I actually put that reactor onto the station specially to hold it on. It can take, well, one of these stood up to about 20 rocket hits, and it was still able to fly. And it can also take extensive damage to all of its systems. One of these was still flying after losing, well, practically that entire section of the ship there on the left side, and a great deal of its engines in the back there had all been lost, and it was still flying. So this thing can take quite a beating. The armour has been extended up around the cockpit to give it a bit more shelter. It also makes it a bit harder to disable, but if you look here, you can still got a good view out the front, even if it's now a lot more closed in because of the protection, but you can still see straight forward for dogfighting purposes, and it'll still function really, really well. I was actually content with this design, and I was going to leave it at that, but again, talking with Nathan, I decided to try and create a variant of this to try and boost the performance even further. And this resulted in taking the entire craft and basically cutting it in half down the middle to add an extra, well, to add an extra meter and a half to its length, which gave room for additional thrusters in all directions to increase its strafing and vertical adjustment power, while I also fitted additional engines, and smack in the middle I actually tucked in an extra power plant to try and feed these extra thrusters, because unlike the other variants, this one didn't have enough power to supply the additional thrusters. It was already maxing out those 7 pretty much whenever it was doing any hard manoeuvring. Weapons configurations spread out on these 3 forward pylons was left the same, though during testing we did actually swap out for Gatlings, 3 Gatlings in the middle, and we tried them with rockets and things as well, just to see how they worked. That is actually where the endurance testing of this design happened. It was by Tridents, for Tridents, just shooting each other, and there was a lot of debris afterwards. I wish I had been recording during that, but I wasn't. And I would probably have crashed the game if I was, so you know. But this is the end results, the Hyper Trident. It's got some serious manoeuvring thrusters. To be honest, the additional weight of the armour plating, the extra engines, and the additional reactor has barely slowed it down. It's not really affected its turning rate, and it can still just move around and do a lot of damage. So that's the Hyper Trident's basic hull, and it's remained pretty much the same, moving over to this, the final version. There have been a couple of additional engine flares just tucked in here, just for good measure. An additional side engine was tucked in here in front of the cockpit, just to make it a bit harder to disable on that side. But the result is this 3-pronged fighter, which is just built, well, for strafing around and shooting at things really. It's got a kill zone where all the guns meet, about 80 metres in front of it, somewhere around here. And that works really, really well, especially against small targets, because then you don't have to line it up perfectly like you do with a Gatling cannon. And with large targets it just soaks them with fire and slowly wears them down. But yeah, that's enough of talking about it. Let's just get into this one. I have actually saved that one over there as the blueprint onto the Steam Workshop, It's fully loaded with weaponry and fuel, so it's good to go. But this is the one I was using for the screenshots that went with it. So this one has been partly depleted. But, yeah, let's just show you the acceleration. 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, max speed already. It's a bit slow on the turning now, I must admit. But in a general strafing situation, it is actually very good. But look how far it went, just in that run. And it does turn a lot better if you start rolling it as well. Just like that, see? It just goes so fast. And it also brakes fast as well because of the equal power systems on it. Yes, saving. Now, there's a home beacon up there, which is for the spawn point. Because that's where there was a respawn. And it just saved, so that means that asteroid is actually gone for good. I don't really mind that much, to be honest. This world was just made for making these fighters. But over there is an arena rock, which is where Nathan and I went for the combat testing. It's basically a rock with a big cave in it, so we just flew all over the place trying to shoot each other with these various ships. And it works really, really well. But yeah, just look at this. It's turning, it's moving, it's just going all over the place. I really do like this asymmetrical design, to be honest. It's just fitted with these three, it looks so good. It manoeuvres so well, especially if you start rolling it, because, to be honest, it does actually seem to turn faster if you start rolling the ship. I'm not sure why. But yeah, that is the Hyper Trident. Hyper Trident? Super Trident. I'm getting the name wrong already. Yeah. Something else I did with this ship actually testing is ramming and crashing. And it handles really well to both as well. I mean, just look at that. I missed the asteroid. But yeah, a little bit of ramming, a little bit of crashing. It doesn't really affect it that much. It can take quite a few knocks before it takes any serious damage. And that's because of all this carefully layered hull on it. To be honest, actually doing the hull took me a lot longer than doing the core systems. Yeah, just scrape it off there. Yeah, boom. That cost me an engine. It's partly gutted the side of the ship, but yeah, still got two weapon systems. Still got a lot of my engines running. Still got that. So as you can see, just doing great. I have actually torn out the side engines of that now, but because of all the side thrusters there, I can still brake and move in that direction, just not very well. Oh, boom. Yeah. Yeah, this ship is starting to take a bit of a battering now, but that is to be expected, really. Forward engine is still good. Vertical engine is still good, mostly, yes. Reverse engines, not really too good because they're mounted in the front. But yeah, that's as you can see, this can take quite a pounding. It's also just fun to start crashing things into rocks, to be honest with you. Yeah, just wearing this thing down now. That crashing around has actually torn the front out of that side of it a bit, but it's still got the weapons on this side, it's still got the reverse thrusters, it can still fly. It can still fly if I cut that entire side straight off it now. And just this bit, it would still fly. Which is really what I want from it. So yeah. That was a look at how the design for the Super Trident came to be. And this is the ship I am entering in Last Stand Gamers dogfighting tournament. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed having this quick look at it and the process that led to it. And I'll see you all some other time. Goodbye.